On today's episode of Faith and Focus, I am very excited to have with me Jess Holmes. She is a Christian. She's a Christian teacher, but more importantly, and most importantly, she's a Christian science person, which is really intriguing to me because I know nothing about science. And she hosts a podcast called Quirks of Creation. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And as I said in that intro, I'm joined with Jess Holmes on this episode. But first, if you're not subscribing, you should subscribe, you should like, you should comment, you should do all of those things. Even if you don't like and you don't want to subscribe, you should do it anyways because it helps me out. And that's what we're all about. It's helping me out. That's my favorite thing is when you help me. No, it does really help the algorithm and it does help boost the show. And of course, this show is a part of my ministry within Faith. And if you are looking for a ministry to support, obviously do as the Lord leads, but you can text the word discipleship to 41444 and donate whatever the Lord lays on your heart. It's not just the podcast, it's Bible teaching, it's discipleship, teaching at my local church, Christian counseling, that's what my master's degree is in. So I offer donation-based counseling to people online, offline, in person, and sometimes people can't even donate all that much. So usually my supporters can help pick up the support for that. They can help pay for counseling sessions for people who may not be able to afford that. So that's all kind of part of my ministry. It's not just this podcast. So I would encourage you to check it out. Again, discipleship to 41444, or you can go to infaith.org and just search me there. But as I said, I've got Jess Holmes, and she hosts a show called Quirks of Creation. And just go ahead and take a look at the trailer for the show, and then we'll jump into the interview.
Fragments of biblical script and other writings were found recently in a cave by Israeli archaeologists.
Scientists at CERN have announced the discovery with 99.999% certainty that the Higgs boson does exist, the so-called God particle.
It's hard to imagine that all of this was once underwater. Remnants of a vast ancient lake can still be seen in the distance.
In fact, there has never been a radiometric dating analysis that simply produces ages that validate to the known ages of rocks.
All right, Jess, thank you for being on Faith and Focus. It's great to, I guess, meet you or even talk to you. We've talked before and done, I think maybe it was on our Daily Wire Friends show that I do. I think you were on an episode with me at one point, quite a while ago, but I know this wasn't our first time, but it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's so good to see you again. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on. I'm excited to have our conversation.
Yeah, like I said, science, like, and I know, like, you, I don't want to say you're a nerd for science. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, I'm a science nerd.
You love it. Now, before we get into it, can I read, this is something that I really appreciated. You had posted this a while back, obviously, when the movie Oppenheimer came out. And I'm going to read, if I can, from your Twitter post about it, and that I think will give a good segue into our discussion. And again, if you want to follow Jess, you can follow her at Real Truth Cactus on Twitter or X. And of course, I'll put all the links to the show, Quirks of Creation, and her Twitter as well, if you want to follow her. But you had said the depiction, this is again Nolan's movie Oppenheimer. The depiction of what it is like to have a science-driven mind is so masterfully done in the first sequence. The way Nolan shows Oppenheimer visualizing the particles, seeing the coalescence between the wave and particle as the wave-particle duality of light and matter begins to establish itself in the world of physics is absolutely breathtaking. When I've described that reading scientific equations is like reading music and hearing a symphony, people don't get it. But the fact that Nolan literally depicted the scientific process like this made me feel so seen. If nothing else, this movie is cathartic to the scientist who struggles to find a place in the everyday world. So can you unpack that a little bit? I've seen the movie, and of course Nolan is great artistically, and if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, there's, kind of long opening segments of, it would almost kind of look like noise, I think, to a lot of people, where it's just like, things shaking or whatever, and it cuts to Oppenheimer's reactions and stuff like that. But that's, I'm assuming, what you're referring to. So can you want to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so in that opening scene, you see this cacophony of light and sound and music. And with him, you can kind of visualize the things he is thinking about because most people don't remember or only think of Oppenheimer in relation to the atomic bomb, but he was a chemist and then became a physicist.
Mm-hmm.
And so his deep understanding of the way matter and light associated, because you have to remember in the same time that Oppenheimer was known, you have Albert Einstein and the quantum revolution, and people were just starting to draw these connections between the fact that light and matter behave as both a wave and a particle, and that there's kind of a breakdown of reality at that point because it's so weird that something could be two things at once. We often hear the Schrodinger's cat interpretation of quantum mechanics, right? That the cat is both alive and dead. And now we were discovering that matter behaves like this. And just when a scientist looks at the math, they are imagining all of these things happening within their mind. They're seeing these things happen within their mind. At least that's how I see it as someone who spent a lot of time reading a lot of this math and doing a lot of these problems instead of just seeing numbers. Because I know, just like talking about my students, they're like, who put the Greek alphabet in this? Why?
Yeah, once math starts getting letters involved, people usually check out and they stop.
And exactly. It's such an easy thing to do. But once you get into it, once you, I think, allow yourself to get into it, I think a lot of times people approach science and have this preconceived notion that it's hard and impossible to understand. And so they've already decided that they don't want to understand it because it's hard.
Sure.
Or they've been told it's hard, or their friends have said, oh, I took chemistry and it was impossible,
Yeah.
Well, and, students' parents say this too. And I'm like, no, listen, go into it with an open mind.
It's like you're
and
being prejudiced against it before you even get into it. Yeah.
Before you even get there. And so that's kind of like the goal of our show, Quirks of Creation. I approach it by trying to make science simple and fun and exciting and approachable.
Sure.
And I think oftentimes people see science and they see these old dudes who have been doing it for 1,000 years, and they're the ones who invented it, and it's boring and dry and nobody can understand it. But it's not like that. It's amazing and beautiful, and it's all created by God.
Yeah. So is light one of those quirks of creation, one of those things that's just like, I mean, how can something be? Now again, I'm already at the edge of my, because there's the double slit experiment, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, if you're observing as an electron, is that what it is? If you're
okay,
if you're observing, I'll let you take over. But as I understand it, it's, if you're observing it, it acts like one thing, but if you're not observing it, it acts like another thing.
This is the crazy thing about quantum mechanics. So yes, what you're describing is the double slit experiment. And so what they did is they passed a beam of basically electrons through a double slits. And if you imagine the double slits, if they're behaving like a particle on the opposing wall, they'll create a solid pattern, right? Just two marks.
It's like shooting a shotgun blast. If you had two slits and like a wood wall and you shot a shotgun blast, it would go through those two open slits, and in theory you would have pellet blast on the back side of it where those two lines are.
Exactly. But then if it behaved like a wave, like let's say the slits were put in a pond and I dropped a pebble and those waves rippled out. Now the wall would block some of the waves, but as the waves pass through the slits, they would then overlap and create an interference pattern. And what actually touches the wall are the amplified moments of the interference pattern. So you get something different visually on the wall from a wave pattern than you would a particle pattern.
Sure.
And what they found was when observing it, they saw the wave pattern. And then they put a detector before the double slits. And when they did that, it gave a particle pattern.
Yeah, that's a quirk. That's a thing that's just like,
it's crazy.
How does that? What's going on there? Like, I mean, what? And is light the only thing that behave? I mean, well, I guess electrons, but like
Electrons,
yeah,
so therefore matter
yeah,
can behave like this as well. And that's, I think, what really broke people in the quantum revolution is that now matter has multiple probabilities. Electrons aren't just in these defined orbits as we have previously talked about them. They're in probabilities, and only once they are observed do all of the probabilities collapse into a single actuality.
hmm.
And to me, that's kind of like God allowing us into his world of creation by
Hmm.
allowing us to play a part in the role of observation.
Sure,
We get to play a role in creation.
sure,
Now, I'm not saying that we get to decide whether it's a
right.
particle or a wave, but by the act of observing, we get to play a role in that creative aspect, which I
Yeah,
think is
yeah. Again, I'm I know that people like myself, we watch stuff about quantum science, and you kind of get into hokey stuff, and you start to think you really understand what's going on, but really you don't. It's too complicated for
so
that.
true.
But it's like I kind of almost like think like when we talk about like the multiverse, like there could be infinite
Mm-hmm.
possibilities out there. It's almost like in God's mind, yes, there can be infinite possibilities, but once God created, He actualized it, and this is
Yes.
what it is. Like but yes, in God's mind, there could be a bug flying around. Um, it's so weird. It's so I don't understand. Other than having an infinitely intelligent, wise, smart God creating something like this, where does something like this come from? I
Right.
I mean,
It's
it just
like, I
evolved from
think
random chance. I guess I don't know.
that is the thing that I always come to. And again, something we talk about a lot on our show. It's that when you stare into the face of all of this incredibly fine tuned universe, how could you not believe that someone was behind it? How could you possibly believe that this happened by random chance? I don't know. To me, that takes way more faith than
Yes.
thinking God designed it.
Yes, it's Frank Turek has a classic book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." It's
Mm-hmm.
so insane how much craziness is out there. And so, is this also true? I've heard, is this the same concept that if a person pictures in their head like a I don't even know if is atom the right word. You got the nucleus with the
Mm-hmm.
the lines around it, and you've
The
got
electron
the
orbits. Yeah.
electron orbits around it. You've got a very simplified picture of an atom. That is not actually what an atom would look like, because those electrons, if you're looking at it, yes, they might be actualized in a single location. But if you're not observing it, it's a cloud around it. It's everywhere. Like the
Yes.
electrons are everywhere.
Correct.
And
Yes.
all in one places, that all in all places at the same time. If maybe
It's
that's the
not
right way to
like
say it.
they're actually in all places at the same time, but because you're not observing it, they could be in
Sure.
all places at the same time. So, but you're right. The way we've depicted the atom with, right, you have the nucleus and the moving electrons around it. That's just a model, a way to think about it, but that's not how it actually looks. In fact, it's an earlier model that was disproven not long after its invention.
Well, it's actually much more, probably, I don't know the kind of physics it is. Maybe like it's much more like a planet orbiting around a
Yeah,
sun, and and that's probably what they would probably conceptualize as, because that's what they understood was that kind of physics, that it's just a planet spinning around a.
exactly. Yeah, Niels Bohr called it the planetary model
Oh,
for that exact reason.
see, this is what's exciting about science, is you've got someone like me. I'm like, I hate science. It's not accessible or whatever. But then you think about it, you realize, oh, smart people think this way too. It's just
Exactly.
you just gotta delve into it more, and you realize there's a lot going on in science. There's a lot of quirks in there.
There is. It's a
Yeah.
lot. In fact, you saying that makes me think of an even earlier model by J.J. Thomson, that he had this model where protons were filling that empty space, kind of like cookies in a chocolate chip.
Mm.
And so it was called the chocolate chip cookie model. So, people come
That
up
may
with all kinds
appeal
of fun
to
things.
elementary and students and middle school students a lot more if you just presented science in the form of
Exactly.
cookies and stuff. So, we kind of jumped right in. How did you come to faith in Christ, and what's that part of the story? And did science play a role in that? Did science make you question anywhere along the way, or in your mind were they always like inseparably linked together?
So I grew up in the Baptist church. I've been going to the same church basically my whole life. My parents were very much involved in church. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was at Vacation Bible School. I even remember the theme from that year. It was Amazon Outfitters. It was
Nice.
amazing. But that was the year that I decided to dedicate my life to Christ. And it's been an on and off journey because when I was in high school and early college, I was like, I don't know about this God, man. The world sucks. Everybody's suffering. But then I went to this talk that Louis Giglio gave. It was called, and he was partnering with Chris Tomlin, and it was called the How Great Is Our God Tour.
Hmm.
And I actually gave a similar sort of presentation in our first episode of Quirks because of how much this talk influenced me. And he basically provided the fine tuning argument of the universe on how the planets are so big and so glorious and amazing, and how they're in just the right space and just the right
Hmm.
tilt and just the right location. And just like trying to fathom how freaking big they are.
Right.
And the Bible literally says God breathed the stars out of his mouth.
I heard one person say the most not underrated, the most like stated, the most
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the right word is for it, but line in the Bible is when like God created the sun, the moon, and the stars also. Like it's just kind of like tacked in.
Right.
Like it's just like, yeah, he threw those in there too. And you realize how many there are out there. There's a lot.
Like we can't even fathom how many stars there are out there. We're still finding new ones.
Right.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
And part of that talk he gave towards the end, a pastor's always got to have his left hook right. He spoke about laminin. And I'm like, oh, what the heck is laminin? It's the cell adhesion molecule. It's the thing that holds your whole freaking body together. And it's shaped like a cross. And that just broke my brain.
All the way down to like the smallest little thing you got the
That's
cross
right.
down in there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so one of the motivators in my life is Colossians 1:7. In him, all things hold together, not just our lives, but all of creation and all of matter. And that is kind of where the seed of science took place. And when I went to college, I majored in chemistry, and I had these amazing chemistry professors who also deeply loved God and revealed God to me more and more through creation and through science. And it's funny because all my liberal arts professors were like rabid atheists. And so you would think it'd be the other way around, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But no, it was all of my psychology teacher and my history teacher were like, oh God, I don't know about that.
Right.
But it was my science teachers who
Well,
loved God and showed me God's glory.
that's interesting because I mean, and maybe this is a sea change that's happening in academia and in the church and people of faith is like, yeah, I think a long time ago, maybe not a long time ago, but decades ago, that would have been the scientific community would have been like,
Yeah,
God, who needs it? But like, it seems like more and more people are realizing this couldn't have happened. Doesn't
by
mean people are
accident.
coming to the Christian faith, but there's the atheist is becoming rarer and rarer in the scientific community. Yet the physics or not the psychological departments, the sociology, those
Mhm.
the ones that deal with those ones are becoming more and more atheistic. And I wonder if that has to do with kind of like what you experienced as you were like, this world sucks, people suck, people are horrible. That's the kind of thing. It's like there can't be a God. Like that's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with people, and
Right.
that's causing them to question how could there be a good God. And I mean, I get it. People are terrible. I mean, that fits within biblical, so
Right.
anthropology. And yeah,
I can kind of see where they're coming from because when you stare into the darkness of humanity over and over and over again,
yeah,
I can see it would be easy to lose yourself in that. And I think that's one of the great things that my co-host Elise brings to the table is that she is able to parse through that darkness and see God's glory and God's plan and all of the crazy routes that
mhm,
human history has taken.
yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that you know, and I get it. We've been going through Job, and I just recorded an episode on some of the things from Job, and I get it. Like there's a lot of suffering, and a lot of it's caused by humans. But one of the points in Job is basically like you have to have as your starting point the fact that God is good, that God is sovereign, that God is righteous, that God is he's not wicked. Like if that's not your starting point, then you're going to question God and not question who should be being questioned, that either, rotten people,
Right.
the horrible world that exists, and I just find it quite comical that, and again, I understand it's a spiritual element. It's not necessarily an intellectual thing with people who doubt, but people have a real problem with like, why does God, if there's a God, why is there all this human suffering and evil and all that kind of stuff?
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, well, what should God do about it? Send a massive flood and wipe everyone out? You probably wouldn't
He
like
kind
that.
of did that.
You wouldn't like that either. Like people point to the Bible and say, why would God do that? It's like, well, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
He's got, so yeah. So humans can seem to ruin people's image of God. But when you start to look at creation, God's all over the place. And of course, scriptures say that's what the heavens do. They declare the glory of God. You can see him. So I had asked you in kind of preparation, like, what's the one thing? I mean, and maybe this is a hard thing to ask. It's asking you to pick your favorite child or something like that. But
Right.
what is the one thing, like one scientific thing that you're like, oh my gosh, I could talk about this for, 3.5, 4 hours. Now, we may not have
Oh
that long,
man.
but
I feel like we already talked about it, the quantum revolution.
okay. Well, then
I could talk.
let's delve
Yeah.
into it a little bit more then. I don't know what strand you want to pluck at, but
Well, and I think this is where God starts to come back into science, right? Because we found the wave particle duality, it feels so much more fuzzy and uncertain than anything we had ever received in classical physics, right? Classical physics comes from Isaac Newton, and you get the three laws of motion, right? An apple falls from a tree, an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Not that we ever knew what force was to begin with. We call it force, but what the heck is it? We don't know. We just called it that. Um, and that's the thing that I always come back to in science is like we give these things names to try and erase the mysticism and spirituality from them, but we don't actually know what they are.
sure.
We don't even know what gravity is. We know how it behaves and how things act, and we call it gravity, but what is it?
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Why does it suck things to it? Like, what's going on there?
Right. We say it's a force between two giant massive bodies, but it's actually not a force. It's a dimension in space. And because it's the interaction between time and distance, I mean, it's all types of these crazy things. And I think the deeper and deeper we get into our understanding of the way matter behaves, the less and less we realize we understand, like we realize we understand nothing.
Right.
And I feel like that just, again, reveals God's glory and God's majesty. And I think that's why, as science has grown, you've seen more people in science lean in to faith, lean towards God, or lean at least towards the idea of a divine creator, because at some point it's going to become impossible to ignore.
Yeah. It's it as a person of faith, it's hard for me to understand like why. Like I really resonate with like the intelligent design, the watchmaker argument. Like it's just like
Yes.
you see a watch and it's like somebody made that, and I had just used that illustration the other day, of you see a watch that has washed up on the beach. You don't assume it just that the pieces randomly just washed up and then assembled into a watch, but it actually goes even further than that, that it's like it would be unbelievable enough to just say, well, all those pieces, the however many 50 pieces make up, a watch, washed up and just happened to fall together into the shape of a watch, but it actually fell into a shape where it has function as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a mass of things that assembled to look like a clock. It actually has function, it has meaning, it has purpose, which
Right.
again, I think points to a mind. There's a mind beyond. It's not just a force slapping objects together. It's actually a mind assembling them to where things actually work.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things atheists used to rely upon was this idea of infinite time, because in the beginning, we didn't know how old the universe was. Some people believe the universe was of infinite age. And it was only again, all of these things seem to coalesce around the same time, which I find phenomenal. And you know, God has a plan in all of these things. I don't think
Providential. Yeah.
very providential. But we learned the age of the universe when Hubble came along and found these galaxies that gave this periodic shining of a nova, and he was able to figure out the distance was outside the Milky Way galaxy. And because he was able to figure out the distance based on the periodic shining, and we know the speed of light is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. And if we can know the distance and the time period, we can figure out how long it's been around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helped us, along with the redshifting, it helped us figure out the age of the universe to be in the neighborhood of 14 billion years. Well, now you've put a timestamp on
Yeah,
it.
you don't have infinite time anymore. You can't.
You don't.
Yeah.
So now the idea of you put the clock in the box and you shake it up and hope it assembles itself, you only get so many shakes now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that that I don't understand, and maybe I just don't understand the scale of the universe. Maybe I'm not understanding the odds, or the number of systems out there. When I hear people speaking from, I have no problem with believing that there could be extraterrestrial life out there. If I believe in God, he can do whatever he wants with all the vastness out there. But for someone who doesn't believe in God and it's just all chance, I just think, really? You would have to believe that it happened more than once. It's hard enough to believe that it happened once on this planet.
Right.
But it happened multiple times on other planets? Maybe I'm not understanding the odds of that happening. Maybe there's enough planetary systems out there that you could play the odds. I don't know what you always hear the astronomical numbers of all of those 30 different perfectly aligned Goldilocks things lining up to make life inhabitable. It's like, whatever, 1 times 10 to the 130th power or something like that. But it's like,
right.
Are there enough planetary systems even out there to play the odds multiple times like that? And it doesn't seem like there is. But maybe I'm completely wrong.
I mean, there's certainly enough out there to play the odds, but the fact that we've yet to find one that has life in the way we know life. So we still haven't even found single cell life on other planets. Forget about complex life, right? We haven't found amoebas, we haven't found insects, we haven't found like any of these simple life forms anywhere we've investigated. And so I think going back to this voyage into space, voyage into the unknown, that I feel like we kind of lost, I don't know, around the 60s or 70s, we kind of stopped doing the space race there for a while.
Sure.
And now Elon Musk is starting to send stuff into space, and we're getting more and more telescopes sent into space. So who knows what we will discover? I'm certainly not going to close my mind to any option. And I don't think that life existing on another planet means that God didn't make us uniquely and wonderfully.
Sure.
He could have just as well made them uniquely and wonderfully.
Right.
Right. I don't know what plan he has for other planets. I just know what plan he has for us. And I think that's what really matters.
Yeah, snowflakes are unique, but there's billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of them. So, yeah.
Right.
So I do think too, like I kind of wonder, like if it would be, I know like the Darwinian explanation for the origin of species really was obviously not a death knell, but it rocked a lot of people's faith, and it really changed a lot of people's beliefs. And I almost wonder, like, is the church prepared? And I know the church isn't going anywhere. Jesus said it's not going to, but I wonder if the average Christian is prepared for another Darwinian type discovery like that. If they were to discover, on a planet somewhere, they just find just amoebas. It's like, would Christians know? I mean, because you could understand, like, well, wait a second. How did those amoebas get there? Okay, did God do it? Why would God have just put single-celled amoebas on a planet? Like, what would be the
because
what would have
he
been
can.
Because he can, yes. But like, you know, I wonder if people would be like, well, what would be the purpose of that? I don't know. It makes more sense. They just randomly popped up. I don't know. Like, it's interesting to think about. But I guess
it is.
It's trusting God. I guess that and every person would have to make
Well,
their own
here's the
decision.
thing. Well, why did God create the universe as it is? Why are there billions of
Right.
stars? Why is there a need for there to be more than the solar system?
Sure.
I mean, we know the gas giants have to be there to protect Earth from space debris, to protect us from the eroding of our magnetosphere. Why does everything else have to be out there?
Right.
I think all of it is meant to be a testament to his glory. So when we look at the universe, there can be no doubt. And if you still doubt when you look at it, I mean, he's given us all the evidence. It's like a giant burning, glowing neon sign at millions of degrees Fahrenheit. Like,
Yeah. So, do you think then? I'm curious to know your thoughts. We obviously aren't going to figure out all of the mysteries of the universe, and we're not going to understand. Even if we were to figure out, quantum physics and understand that perfectly, I mean,
right.
we don't even understand Newtonian physics perfectly, but we've had a handle on that for a few hundred years. If we were to grapple quantum physics and okay, we figured this out, we think we're pretty well, we got a handle on it, we can utilize it, we know how to work with it, all that kind of stuff. Is there another layer that we would eventually crack and find out beneath that? And is that what that's on the infinitesimal level? But then you've got the universe where it's exploring planets that may have life. Is that going to be part of what eternity is just exploration and coming to knowledge?
Oh, I hope so.
Like, I mean, wouldn't that? I mean, as a scientist and someone who loves
Yes.
science, it's like all eternity is just cracking that even deeper and going further. And maybe it'll take 400 years, but we got all eternity to do it, and we don't have sin getting in the way.
This is my view of heaven. God created us to work. God created us to be creative beings, just as He is creative. And so I don't think heaven is going to be us sitting on a cloud, playing a harp, going, yay, God. I think we worship God in the things we create and the things we discover and the things that we learned. And I could totally see the heavens just being our playground for exploration and investigation. It's like a big, glorious sandbox. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and that's, it really does bother me because I do think people, and I think it's more of a defense mechanism. I don't think people really have faith or don't have faith based on their conception of the afterlife. But when people kind of just dismiss it, we're just sitting around on clouds playing harps all the time. It's like, that's obviously unrealistic, and I wouldn't find that exciting either. But when you think about like anything, like everyone loves something, and like you can think of like you as a scientist, if God for all eternity is like, yes, here's your playground, and it's going to be to my glory. There's going to be no sin involved. Explore, do it, like whatever you want to do, and God's there with you, and He's like, and maybe somebody who's like, I wasn't really into science in the past life, but here I've got Jess, and I can hang out with her for 10,000 years, and you learn to love this stuff, and you start to explore. Or somebody who likes music, loves music, infinitely being able to explore and create new instruments and create new sounds and create new music. People who love storytelling, telling new stories. Like, how is that not what every person would love to do? For me, I love sitting around talking theology and stuff. Like, we're not going to understand all the mysteries of the universe and all the mysteries of theology and the intricacies and infinitude, I guess is the right word, of God's character. Where people like me are going to be sitting around for all eternity talking about, what God is like. There's a book called Deadline, a novel by Randy Alcorn, and one of the characters dies, and it's his perspective in heaven, so it bounces back and forth. He's in heaven and one's on earth, and the one character in heaven, he's walking with who was his guardian angel, and they're talking, and he just thought he's learning things, and he goes, it's so different. I just assumed that I would know everything when I got to heaven. Like, I wouldn't be exploring and learning things. And the guardian angel, like, kind of is like, you thought you would be God when you got here?
Right.
So for all eternity, you're going to be exploring all of this stuff. I mean, does that, what does that do for you? Does that excite you? Does that
just so amazingly exciting? Like, not only would I get to explore God's playground, but I get to explore it with all who came before, right? I get to explore it with my God. I get to explore it with other scientists who are filled with this great wonder like I am. I get to explore it with my friends and my family and getting to see all of those people again, meet all of those people again. Just when I think about the glory of heaven, when I think about seeing my savior face to face, I'm like, oh, I am not meant for this world. I am ready to go. Let's go, get me out of here.
Right. Yes. And I think, again, I think that that's what people don't understand. I think people think, oh, you're going to get bored eventually. And I just think,
No way.
man, you got a small view of God if you think you're going to get bored. And it's just like, I guess I don't know what heaven's going to be like and what our time relationship's going to be like and all that kind of stuff. But I just think, again, like for someone like you might just think like, you know what? I don't know what the line is going to be like to do science and talk with someone like Isaac Newton. But that's going to come up. You're going to be able to do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And you'll be able to be like, okay, Isaac, let me catch up to speed of what you didn't learn, what we learned after you died.
Right.
And then, okay, let's go do something else. And you and Isaac Newton go off and my friends and I, we talk about this. And I even told my friend, like, I think that this is one of the things that we as Christians should do is, I know people like think like you're going to do something heretical if you talk about heaven in a blasphemous way or an irreverent way or whatever. And I just think, I don't think the danger afflicting Christians today is that we think about heaven too much. Like that's not the danger.
Right. I think we don't think about it enough.
We don't think about it enough. And I just think like, my friend is like, not that going to see the Grand Canyon or going to see, fantastical things isn't something that people can do and all that kind of stuff. But he's just like, yeah, I'll see it when I get to heaven if I don't see it now. Like, and like we kind of laugh about that and it's like, yeah, I'll be able to experience that when I get there. Like, and I just think like we sometimes fail to do that as Christians. We think that this life is all that there is.
Yeah.
And it takes us away from eternity. We're gonna have eternity to do these things. Again, obviously not sin, but yeah, I think it's very exciting. So so back to quantum stuff. Okay, I've got a question. Quantum computers. Does that have anything to do with quantum science?
It does. Okay. So quantum computers rely on this unknown probability of electrons and of matter. So right now, most of our computers rely on binary code, right? The ones and the zeros. Sure. But what if the ones and the zeros could be both 1 and 0 at the same time? Well, now your computer can process things a little bit faster. And so a quantum computer is a computer that treats everything as a probability and is able to process information faster. Now, because these computers are so high powered, they have to be kept extremely cold. Like I'm talking as close to 0 degrees Celsius as humanly or as 0 degrees Kelvin as humanly possible, which is basically no particle motion at all. And so now you're in a place where it's really, really hard to cool these things down.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of money, a lot of energy, and a lot of rare gases that are hard to come by, like liquid helium.
Sure.
Just like insanely hard to achieve. But they exist.
Is that because isn't that like one of the earliest one? Is it? No, it's not the first one on the periodic table.
Hydrogen. It's the first one. It's hydrogen helium.
Okay. Is that why it's so hard to make it liquid? I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's so tiny. It's a gas. I mean, naturally, it's a gas, and so trying to get it to a liquid state, like it's a noble gas, it doesn't want to interact with itself, and to get to this phase where they're all associated together, now you have intermolecular forces, and because it doesn't want to hang out with anybody, it's like, I need to be really cold and really still if I'm going to hang out with you, buddy.
These noble gases, they think they're just better than everyone else.
Facts.
They're so high and mighty.
So high and mighty.
That's awesome. So so quantum computing has like basically this. It's not just faster. It's like not infinitely faster, but it's like scores of magnitudes. It's like we're not even talking in the same, like
not even in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, okay. So it's not like a difference between a $500 laptop and a $2,000 laptop or something. It's not.
No, this is the difference between like a $500 laptop and a $2 billion laptop.
Yeah. So are we going to get to the point? I mean, is that something that is even possible? Like when you think of like they kind of, people always say, and I'm assuming it's probably true, that there's more computing power in your phone than in the rocket.
Right.
The Apollo rockets that went to space. So, like, are we ever going to be able to get to the point? Is that even physically possible to get to the point where you have something like that running on such a small scale that it's like in a cell phone? Or is that just something
I,
that's
I
not
think
physically possible?
I think they're coming up with new technologies to get there. The problem is the materials we have available, because you need a material that is super conducting that also will not fry the electronics inside, which
Gotcha.
is why we have to cool it down so much. I know pretty recently there was a lab in China that was able to produce a superconducting material that retained its superconducting abilities at room temperature and didn't create all of the static electricity problems
Hmm.
that you normally get when you're at room temperature.
Gotcha.
And so that's just the first step. Hoping that research is honest. That's another part, is these
Yeah.
people a lot of times do research and they fake it, and then you end up with a crisis and
Yeah.
all of these different things. So hoping that people are doing research honestly, putting out honest research, and it's reproducible. So not just this lab in China makes it, this lab in Denmark can make it, this
Mm.
lab in America can make it. Then
Yeah.
we know we can get somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I mean, it's exciting. It's in theory. In
Yeah.
practice, I am at the point with technology that I'm like, I'm ready to, like, draw the Amish line right here. I'm fine
I
with
feel
where
it.
I
Yeah.
feel like where we're at. I've told people my line in the sand is I don't do VR. I have to draw the line somewhere, and I don't want to. I don't even want to get there. I don't want to.
I don't want a chip in my head.
I don't want to chip. I don't want to do any of that stuff. And I know
Mm-mm.
just playing a silly game on the Oculus is the first step. That's how they get you, though.
That's how
And
they get you.
it's like it's a it. The way I said it to someone the other day is it's a world I don't want to live in, so I better not even get on the Mayflower. Like I don't even want to
Yeah.
set sail to that new world. And so
We've all seen Wally.
yeah,
You know, nobody wants that future.
right. Yeah, it's very dystopian. So and I think like, you know, the sad thing is we see stuff like The Matrix, and I think it's not going to be a violent machine takeover. I think people are going to
Yeah.
climb into those pods themselves basically and just
Yeah.
go
That's
to
why
sleep.
I love the motto, I will not eat the bugs. I will not live in the pod.
Yes. Yep, I'm not
You
doing it.
know,
I'm
not.
not putting the VR headsets on. I'm not doing any of that
Mm-mm.
kind of stuff. So yeah, I just think like, man, and it, you know, this is I not maybe not, it's a theme of the movie Oppenheimer, to circle back to that. It's just like, and this goes to human nature, and it's like as exciting as it is, you know, and that's, you kind of see that in Oppenheimer a little bit. Like all of these scientists were so excited about this possibility, and then it's like, let's make a bomb out of it. Let's just destroy stuff. And it's like,
Right. Well, remember, the scientists necessarily did not want to make a bomb out of it. It
right,
was
the
the call of
military.
war.
Yes, yeah,
Unfortunately, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you know, and it's just like, you know, as exciting, you think about all this stuff, and it's just the VR headsets, and I just think you know, we know human depravity. I know exactly where that's going, and yeah.
Yup.
And then when you think of quantum computing, it's like, oh great, we can do all the depravity we do 100,000
Faster.
times faster
Yeah.
now. Like, yeah, it's just it's does not a world that I want to live in. So, well, hey Jess, we are running up on 45 minutes. As I told you, I want to be respectful of your time. Let's definitely do this again. I mean, I know
Yeah.
anything science related. I know I can. If I see anything, I'm going to say I'm going to pull Jess in, and we're going to talk about this. If you don't cover it on your show, but any last little quantum thing you wanted to throw out there? Any little quirk of creation about that?
Remember, the universe is more mysterious than we could ever hope for, and God is more amazing than you ever dreamed.
Yes, amen. That's great. Great way to end it. So thank you again, Jess, for coming on. And folks, if you want to follow Jess again on Rumble, her show Quirks of Creation, I'll link it in the show notes, and you can find her on Twitter, X at Real Truth Cactus. Is that true on Instagram as well? Do you do anything else under that?
Yep,
that
I
moniker?
have Real Truth Cactus Instagram. That's my personal one, and we have our Quirks of Creation Instagram as well.
Alrighty, and then of course be praying for her. We didn't talk about this, but her and her husband are in the initial steps of the adoption process. So they had their home visit, and that sounds like it went well. So just be praying for them as they continue down that path. I'll also include the link to their Give, Send, Go in the show notes. And again, thanks, Jess, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, have a good one. While Faith and Focus is a ministry of mine as a missionary within faith, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast or lived out by guests on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of In Faith as a mission.